Welcome back, guys, to another Elite Behemoth raid, and today we are going to be doing things a bit out of order with Magma Demon. I already put up my Hydra video, and naturally, Necro Giant is next, but I had some issues with the recording that I'm trying to sort out before I can get the Necro Guide together. So for now, I decided to move on to Magma as we are at the end of the season, and it might be useful for some of you, or at least, those of you that are heading into Season 2 and fighting this eventually. In this video, I'll be going over everything you need to know to be successful in this raid, and I will do my absolute best to make it as understandable as possible, because this behemoth has quite a bit going on, and it's easy to get lost. That being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Now, before we get started, I always like to shamelessly plug my Discord, and I want to even more so lately. My Discord, the dojo, has had a huge increase in players since I started doing YouTube, and it really is starting to feel like a solid and active little community. It's filled with helpful members and written guides that I personally have made and will be a staging point for any events I plan in the future. If this interests you, please stop in and say hi. We would love to have you. So, Magma Demon. This elite raid is one of my absolute favorites. It isn't super difficult, but it requires coordination and adherence to mechanics, which is why it's so fun to me. It really feels more like a classic WoW boss fight instead of a ham-fisted DPS check. The Season 2 modifier is Molten Might, which makes it so that the Magma Devourer and Manipulator take 30% less magic damage, and the Magma Reaper and Devastator take 30% less physical damage. The best part about this mechanic is that it can largely be ignored, unlike the Season 2 mechanics you have in Elite Necro or Hydra. For this elite raid, I recommend not overcomplicating things. Just take all archers and 8 tanks. You'll most likely be fine. However, if you're a free-to-play alliance trying to take this, the Season 2 mechanic is a bit more important to pay attention to. That being said, you may be better off taking an even split of mages and archers, and you will have to change up the way you do the mechanics slightly, which I'll go over later. As for pretty much all behemoths, I recommend Sindri and Freygar for your DPS march, and Madeline Garwood for your tank march. If you do decide to run mages, your best bet is just Lilia and Valen, although you cannot debuff behemoths, so they are at a significant disadvantage. The first thing we need to go over is the skills of the behemoths. In Magma, there are 4 different bosses, all which require attention. Anytime you kill one of them, the remaining bosses get substantially stronger. Because of this, an even tempo needs to be considered to try and get them all down at relatively the same time. Whenever you deal 20% of a boss's HP, it will drop mana healing stones. If you're doing the mechanics correctly, you should not need these immediately every time, but obviously they are still an important mechanic to note, and DPS leads need to be on top of maneuvering the group to pick these up when your raid lead or tank calls for them. The final 2 core mechanics that all the bosses share is they cannot be debuffed or impaired, and they become enraged after 10 minutes, which will most likely result in a wipe. Moving on to the boss-specific mechanics, they all have their own unique attack patterns. These are not really significant, and because of this I will not go over each of their movesets, but you can find them in the codex under the creature section. Ultimately, you just need to make sure you're not standing where you're going to get hit. It really is that simple. Generally, this is at the back of the circle, but not outside of it. If you are outside the circle when attacking the behemoths, you will do significantly reduced damage. That being said, there are 2 mechanics that you need to be paying attention to at all times, or you will wipe the raid. The range mechanic and the stacking mechanic. The range mechanic is primarily on tanks to make sure they deal with appropriately. Anytime one of the Magma Demons cannot attack their target in melee range, they will do a ranged attack, which is always AoE. This will destroy your DPS players. Tanks need to make sure they always maintain proper aggro and that they also rotate properly as to not leave much time for the behemoths to get off many ranged attacks. When rotating the main tanks and off tanks, it needs to happen as fluidly as possible, and tanks need to try and avoid intersecting with DPS players as much as possible. The stacking mechanic is a mechanic that each behemoth has. Every 18 seconds, the behemoth will do an AoE in its respective circle, which will deal minor damage to all legions in the circle and apply 1 of 4 possible stacks. The damage of this skill will increase as you get more stacks, which is generally why we recommend rotating at 3 stacks. This also ensures a safe buffer should you take more stacks by accident. Please note that if no legions are in the circle when this ability is cast, the behemoth will instead hit the entire raid. These stacks can stack up to 5 times, they last 90 seconds, and will not be cleansed with a healing stone. If you get a 6th stack of the same type, you will die instantly. Because of this mechanic, it's important to create 4 groups and rotate amongst the behemoths, which we will go over later. Each behemoth has one unique major ability to look out for, and the DPS leads need to be paying attention to these mechanics as they rotate so they can correctly maneuver their teams. The Devourer has a mechanic where adds are summoned. If you allow these adds to reach the Devourer, they will heal it by 2.5% of its max HP each. Simple mechanic, but it's easy to overlook. The Magma Devastator has a tank buster mechanic. This mechanic can and will kill the tanks. It charges up and then does damage in a half circle that hits for 15% of the unit's max HP. This needs to be carefully avoided while also making sure the tank quickly returns as to not allow the Devastator to get off ranged attacks. The Manipulator marks 2 random legions and then summons a pool of lava below them after a short duration. These pools of lava do 5% of your legion's max HP each second and need to be avoided. It is worth walking completely around them and taking extra time to avoid them when you're transitioning between behemoths. This is one of the most important mechanics of the exclusive ones, as it tends to kill the most marches. The Magma Reaper will mark a single legion, immobilize it, and knock up all legions around the target in the air. After this, it will send a scythe at the immobilized legion. This can instantly kill the immobilized legion and any nearby legions if too many allies are knocked up, because the damage scales with every legion that's knocked up. It is important to note that this mechanic can largely be ignored if you have a T5 heavy raid group. The mechanics are straightforward, and this sounds more complicated than it actually is in practice. Chances are, if you're in an alliance with some whales, you likely won't struggle with any of this. If not, though, then the mechanics are important and should be studied. The elite mechanics change a few things, but don't really alter the way the raid is completed, because if you follow the guide, you will mostly avoid the elite mechanics that can really mess things up. The first set of elite mechanics are that the boss has 25% increased HP, defense, and attack, and allied marches have their HP, defense, and attack reduced by the same amount. The boss also heals for 0.5% of its max HP every time a march dies. The biggest change that causes the most wipes is that the bosses heal for 100% of the damage they deal when they do ranged attacks. This is why the tanks being on top of their game is so important. If the bosses get too many ranged attacks off, especially into the blobs of squishy DPS units, it will likely cause the raid to wipe. Now that you understand the raid mechanics, I'll show you what it looks like in practice. So here we have BDM/BDO's Elite Magma success attempt. We have 3 sigils on the screen. I'll explain each of them: the tank or the shield sigil, the heart sigil, and then the target sigil. The shield sigil is your main tank. The main tank is usually composed of a tier 5 unit that has very high skilled heroes, because obviously they're the main tank, they need to take up a lot of the damage. You have the heart icon, which is your off tank, which this can be a tier 4 unit. If you have to do this all with tier 4 units, it's going to be rough. It's possible you may even have to add an additional tank per behemoth to make sure that you can rotate more frequently, but it's very hard to do this with a full tier 4 alliance in Season 2. Now, the target icon is your DPS leads. So the DPS leads need to know the mechanics so that they can avoid things. They also need to be generally some of your highest DPS performers. Now, obviously, there are some pay-to-win aspects in the game, so your DPS leads don't necessarily need to be the highest DPS performers, because that could just be because of money. It just needs to be somebody who's consistent in the DPS rankings. That way, everybody else that's following that DPS lead can have a good idea of where to stand and when to do damage, things like that. So that's why it's important to have those in every elite raid, is to have these DPS leads that will kind of guide the fight for the DPS. Because a lot of times people die because of bad positioning and things like that. And if you're a DPS lead, you shouldn't be dying to bad positioning. So moving on here, the first thing we do in our alliance is we always practice the mechanics for everyone, just to give everyone a real quick refresher. So as you can see, we're rotating clockwise. Anytime you get 3 stacks, that's when you rotate as the DPS. You're going to rotate clockwise. So you can see all the DPS are kind of staying with their DPS leads, and then they're rotating. Whenever the raid lead calls out 3 stacks, then we rotate. So then we rotate again. And again, it's important as a DPS lead to make sure you're doing proper positioning so that you guys are not taking the least amount of damage, and also not messing up to any of the major mechanics that can cause wipes. The tanks are just kind of standing off to the side, because right now we're focusing on making sure the DPS do the proper things. Now, I'm going to fast forward here a little bit, because I do get a little off topic. And I'll go back here to this spot real quick so you can kind of see what's happening here. So your off tanks, the hearts, are in the middle. They're in the center, or they should be. It looks like a couple of them are kind of like wherever they want to be. And then your main tanks are out front. Obviously, they're doing the main tanking. Now, what the main tank and the off tanks will do, you'll see here, is they will rotate the main tanks between the 2 behemoths. So at the 3 stacks, everyone's rotating, not just DPS, okay? Everyone's rotating at 3 stacks. So the main tanks will swap with their partner. So their partners are going to be in these corners. So either if you're on the bottom or the top, you're rotating with just one person over, in these different areas. So John and Mathurian are rotating down here. So basically, once John gets 3 stacks and Mathurian gets 3 stacks, then they just switch sides. Okay, so that's what you saw there. Now, once you get 3 stacks again at this behemoth, then you rotate in the off tanks. This allows the main tanks to, again, either go get healing or drop stacks. Okay, so what's going to happen is the off tanks are going to go forward. Everybody's rotating clockwise. All the DPS are rotating clockwise still, right? But the off tanks are going to go forward. And then they're going to do the same dance. They're going to rotate with their partner. So Rubler and I think it's Motu. Motu are going to swap, and they are going to take another 3 stacks as well. And then you just repeat that. So then once we rotate again, then the main tanks come back in, and they start tanking again, and then you just repeat that. Rinse and recycle. If you continuously do this while avoiding the major mechanics that each of the bosses have, you're going to complete this no problem, okay? So that's the entire, basically flow. If you don't want to know how the mechanics work or anything like that, basically dodge everything that's red on the ground and also just do this dance. If you're a DPS, you're rotating clockwise every time you get 3 stacks. If you're a tank, you're swapping with your partner either in the south or the north, and then once you swap once, then you swap with your off tank. And then the off tanks swap once, and then they swap back with the main tanks. That's all there is to it. Now moving on, we're going to go ahead and fast forward through here so I can get to the actual fight. So it looks like it starts right around here. And I will show you what the full fight looks like with just some overarching commentary here. This is not scripted, so forgive me. So we start off, Mathurian goes in, he's going to tank. We're going to just focus on my perspective because I do hit all the bosses, so I can kind of go over everything in each of the mechanics that we talked about. So again, each of the bosses has their own their own moves that they're going to do. You can just kind of ignore those. As long as you're back towards the edge of the circle, but not outside of it, you're going to be fine. You're going to dodge almost all the mechanics. You're not going to take any damage from them. This is mainly just the tanks soaking up damage, which is what they're doing. Now, right here, I believe, is where they're going to do their unique mechanics. So, yep, here goes the half circle. If you look in the left, Mathurian's going to take it because he's a big boy tank, so he's going to just take it. 36k, it is a tank buster. You definitely don't want to be caught in that if you're a DPS because that's going to reduce your damage significantly when your health goes down. So as you can see in the top left, if you look under the character portrait I have, you can see how many stacks I have. So we have 3, now we're rotating. So DPS are rotating. Mathurian's going the wrong way. Just not sure what's going there. We are going to go ahead and get the heal stone. Again, you don't need to get them right when they drop, but it is usually a good idea to get them on your rotation if you need them. And usually the raid lead's going to be paying attention to that. If you guys need them, he'll call it out. Now right here, I'm kind of too close. So you'll see that I move. I try to move our DPS a little bit to the right because I want us to be, in position to immediately rotate when we need to. The unique mechanic comes out for the Devourer here, and it's just the ads. So you'll see we focused on the ads. There's still 2 more. Looks like we do take those ads down, and then we kill them. And you look in the top left again, we're at 2 stacks. 2 seconds. Boom, we're at 3 stacks here. Now we're going to rotate. So we're rotating again. And the tanks are rotating out for the sub DPS. So you see the sub DPS come in. And again, you can see the ranged attacks going out. You're trying to avoid that because that heals the behemoths. We're going to grab the heal stone. We're stacked up on the very far right side, which is where you want to be. You want to be as close to the next rotation as possible. It's better just to maneuver properly. So here, the unique mechanic, you saw all of us get knocked up. Again, we're a T5 heavy alliance, so we can kind of just tank this, but look at the damage. You couldn't even see it there. it hits like 30,000 sometimes. It's worse than the tank buster if you get enough people knocked up. So because of that, if you're tier 4, if you're doing this with a weaker alliance, you definitely want to be careful of that mechanic. You probably want to watch out from whoever's mobilized and just get out of there. So we got 3 stacks again. We're rotating. Again, the ranged attacks are going off. You can see the heals. If you look at the behemoth, the Reaper behemoth, you see how much it's healing? It heals for an absurd amount. if too many of those go into blobs. So you really got to watch out for that. There's 2 sets of pools here on the ground. You can see, look at that, it's ticking for 6,000 damage on the marches that walked into it. So we do get the heal stone, and we start our DPS up again. And once again, we're just, DPSing here. The unique mechanic's going to come out. We're at 2 stacks. The unique mechanic comes out here in a second. There it is. It marks 2 units. You can see there's two AoE fields there. And as soon as they get marked, usually you want to move them out of the group, because now he just brought that into the group. The tank moved out, but the other guy just brought it into the group. Everybody's walking through all the magma here. If they would have just stayed on me, that wouldn't have happened. You saw I didn't walk on any of the magma. So it's a lot of damage, and that matters because it's going to reduce your overall damage. So again, we're rotating. By now, we've done a full circuit. You can see I only have 3 debuffs up, though. It's because one of them is going to always fall off. This is why you're doing this rotation of clockwise, because by the time you get back to where you started, your debuff for that Magma Demon will have fallen off. So again, we're just DPSing. Here comes the Tank Buster, unique mechanic. Again, Mathurian is just going to tank it because he's a big boy. I think that's Mathurian. We're not getting the heal stone here, I don't believe. Now, here I rotate across because I honestly thought they were going to kill the Devourer, so this was actually a mistake. But you'll see that I quickly correct that, and we go to the right place. But the tanks are a little confused. Tanks are a little confused. They didn't rotate properly. It's okay, though. We recover. They're low enough to where it doesn't really matter. One of the behemoths is already dead. So we finish up the Devourer here. It's going to go down very soon, as well as the Destroyer in the bottom left. And then at this point, you're just kind of going and killing them, killing the last one, which is the Reaper. So you still want to kill the ads here. It's very important that you focus on the objectives here. Cool. He's dead. Now the last one, you really have to just burn down. Again, you want them to be as low as possible when they all start dying, because they're going to buff the defense and attack of the remaining ones. And so when 3 of them are dead and only 1 of them is alive, look, we have the entire raid attacking this thing, and it's taking quite a while to kill it. If you just look at its health bar, it's going down pretty quickly, but not quickly enough. So we dedicate the whole raid. As you can see, we do have some mages sitting outside the circle. They're doing reduced damage. There's also somebody just standing in the middle doing nothing. So, I mean, that looks like that was Kath. So, yeah, that is the entire raid. That's how it's done. Basically, it's very straightforward. Like I said, if you just follow those mechanics, you're fine. The only time you really need to worry about the unique mechanics is when those mechanics are going to hit, weaker players. Then if you're a tier 4 with low research or low hero skills, you've really got to be careful, or even a low march size, you really got to be careful of these unique mechanics because they will kill you. And when you die, that causes a world of issues, especially when it comes to healing all the bosses, things like that in the elite raid. You don't want to be dying, okay? It didn't look like anyone died at all throughout this raid in our group. Maybe some people died, I'm not entirely sure. I don't really have a good angle to see the whole raid. A lot of it's cut off sometimes. I don't think anybody died, though. This is a very, very smooth raid. We did a good job. So there you have it. That is the entire raid. I'm going to try to get more videos out like this, especially for all the behemoths. I know that this is a better way of showing the raid mechanics and exactly what you need to do than my last Hydra video, so I'll probably end up remaking that one. There's a lot of people that like to know the why or the how when it comes to the raids and the mechanics and things like that, but there's also a lot of people that just want to know exactly what to do, and that's it. So I'm trying to adhere to both groups here by showing, a completion video and then also showing all the mechanics in depth. And hopefully this is a good style of video for you guys. If you do like it, please let me know in the comments. That'll help me kind of gauge interest in this type of video and maybe modify it in the future if I need to. If you have any requests for guides or anything like that, please let me know. Otherwise, if you want to, you can visit me at Twitch, or on Twitch rather. I do answer questions there when I stream. It's the end of the season right now for us in our season, so most likely I'm not going to be doing a whole lot of streaming until next season as far as Call of Dragons is concerned, but I do play other games, so if you want to come by and talk to me about Call of Dragons still, that's completely fine. I don't mind. Anyways, thanks for watching, you guys, if you stuck around this long, and I'll see you guys in the next one.